Welcome to the first episode of the Alameda Community Lore Center, your favorite podcast where we talk about ACLC and its ins and outs. Today we have some special guests here to talk with me about ACLC history. Samuel is a student here at ACLC who has thoroughly done his research. Could you tell us a little bit about the founding of ACLC, or as it was called back then, AACLC?
I'd be glad to. ACLC, or as it was known when it was founded, Arthur Andersen Community Learning Center, was founded in 1992 as a charter school funded by Arthur Andersen, the law firm.
Accounting firm?
Accounting law firm. Because they were a law firm for stuff. And then
interesting. So the school had a lot of money, right?
Yeah, the school was rolling in dough. In the early 2000s, I believe 2004, Arthur Andersen, the firm, was involved in the Enron scandal.
Whoa!
Oh, that's my alarm. The Enron scandal was basically this company called Enron, which was, I believe, an energy company, was lying to its investors about how much money they were losing by saying they weren't losing as much money as they actually were. And Arthur Andersen was assisting them as their lawyer.
Ooh.
And also possibly destroying important documents. So when this became public knowledge, Arthur Andersen became bankrupt and was forced to close, which cut almost all of the school's funding overnight. But now our school is funded by the Alameda Unified School District, and we're a charter school under Alameda Unified, and now we have less funding, but we're still pretty cool.
So that explains why all our Chromebooks are completely obliterated and dysfunctional. It's an accounting firm, right?
Yeah, Cole was right.
So yeah, this accounting firm, it pretty much funded the entire school, like off the bat, right?
Yeah.
So
are we being filmed?
Yeah, it's just rolling.
I'm on Twitter, sorry.
How did ACLC start? Like, how did it come to be? Did it have funding in the beginning?
So basically, there was a bunch of these wealthy parents who wanted to make a school exclusively for their children, and a lot of them were from out of state. And so it was supposed to be a school for out-of-state wealthy students who could find a school.
You're saying this random.
Huh?
What?
No, it was actually, right? Was it not?
Did you present and say that was what happened in the thing?
I thought that's what it... Did you make that up?
Trivia for which one was the
I'm
real
so
one.
confused as to what's real and what's not.
Oh my God!
So then why was Arthur... Because they just wanted to make a school?
Yes, it's good for PR. They funded like a competition, right? They were like, oh, we like doing education stuff, so we're going to fund a school. But we have to present a cool idea for us to fund, and then they got really good PR.
It's also to prove that they're not economic monsters.
Except they were.
I'm gonna skin you alive.
All right. How was AACLC founded?
Arthur Andersen had this competition called the School of the Future, in which they were going to fund a charter school by basically paying for its charter. And AACLC won. And so it was funded by Arthur Andersen, which meant that AACLC had a lot of money. Sorry, yeah.
How many schools were there in this? Like, was it impressive that we won?
I do not know.
I think there are like 300 schools.
There is
There were a lot of schools.
Huh?
Yeah, because there were a lot, right?
There were quite a few, yeah.
I honestly
At least
don't know.
4.
It was a national competition, so there were at least like a few hundred.
Yeah, there were at least 4. No, that much.
A few hundred, I guess. So yeah, it's pretty impressive that we won, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
I
You
guess.
know how I wanted to name our school Cowboy Bebop Community Learning Center? Someone, or Cowboy Bebop School, in the article from like 15 years ago, someone was like, I think we should just rename our school to Batman Community Learning Center or something. Because I think they said like it would have no impact or whatever. I don't know. The whole article was just the Washington Post flaming AACLC. I think this was like directly after Arthur Andersen like went bankrupt. I think basically they would waive the fees of a charter school if they
Mhm.
presented themselves to Arthur Anderson. And our school won, and so we were dubbed Arthur Anderson Community Learning Center. And our school had a lot of funding until around 2004 or 2005 when the Enron scandal occurred, in which an energy company called Enron was lying to its shareholders and investors about how much money they were losing, because they were losing a lot of money. And Arthur Anderson was their accounting firm. And they were also helping them lie and even destroying important documents, allegedly. And so when this became public knowledge, Arthur Anderson and Enron both went bankrupt, and the school lost all of its funding. Novak's history of ACLC is very interesting. He kept interrupting our presentation, Erica and I's, because we had him in our first or second class.
So we should get Novak in
You
here.
should. I thought you were.
Oh, yeah.
You definitely need to get Novak on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Could you tell us the actual history of ACLC? Because we got Samuel on here, and he kind of just lied. You got to tell us the actual history.
Well, I agree. I agree that many lies have been perpetuated by Mr. Samuel Jonas and his associates when they're talking about the history of our school, and I find that, quite frankly, to be offensive. But I can tell you how this really began. I mean, a lot of people will tell you that the school started in, 1992, whatever the year was. I don't even remember. Why would I remember something that's just a straight-up lie?
That's
I
fair.
wouldn't. So, the school actually started in 1890. And at that point, there was nothing here. Believe it or not,
Wait, really?
actually, there was no city here. I know they say
Just
that...
ACLC.
No, there was no ACLC
Oh.
either. There was a big hole here.
Ah.
So it would go down very, very, very deep. And there was once a sort of I don't know how to describe it, some kind of society here. That's where the 3 mirrors from the boys' bathroom come from. There are these 3 glossy plates of metal.
That's why they look so old.
Because they are very old.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously. If you've ever been to the boys' bathroom, you could tell. You could see the dust on there. We did some radiocarbon dating on the boys' bathroom. And that's probably the oldest part of this school that's still on the surface.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure the roots of the mirrors go all the way down to where the bottom of the hole used to be.
They're old
back in the
mirrors. They probably have
1890s.
deep roots.
That's true. And you can tell by their age and wear, But back then, these 3 mirrors were in the possession of one Lynn Boone. Before David Hoops and Arthur Anderson arrived here, the very first settlers in Alameda, believe it or not.
And they founded the
They
school.
founded the school at the bottom of this pit.
How did it fill up?
Well, that's a long story.
Oh,
but
well, we'll get to
first of all, they had to secure an alliance with Lynn Boone and her society because they wanted the mirrors. They were immediately seduced by the fact that the mirrors reflected light and they could see their reflections in them. They'd never seen something like that before. Yeah. So they immediately wanted them, but she couldn't pull out the roots because they were very deep. They were very deep then. Yeah. Probably thousands of years old at this point. Yeah. But I'd say, then this is a controversial part of ACLC history, the part that they don't want you to know about. So they invited Lynn Boone to a banquet at the very bottom of the pit. And there they poisoned her. And they thought that they killed her. But when they threw her dead body into a crypt and buried it, her mind was still alive. Of course. And her body became like a separate organism. And it would multiply like a cancerous cell. She's still down there now. That's insane. See the stage. You know how they had to change the stage? Yeah. It's because the moisture from these gases, these hot gases that are from her decomposing body, it's perpetually decomposing, but it's never losing matter. It's only gaining it. Yeah, and of course. So the moisture started to corrode the stage, which is the first level, in 7 seals that lead down to the bottom where Lynn Boone is. I'm pretty sure she's breached
they taught us, Robert Braithwaite, he taught us a little bit about that before they exiled him.
Well, you don't want to know what happened to him, do you? No, that's all. No, we won't talk about that yet. We'll maybe save it for later.
I have a question about Lynn Boone.
Yes.
So her name kind of sounds like Lizard Tomb. Is it true? Is that true?
Well, there have been in depictions from very ancient times. There was a mention of her having a forked tongue, and it's also true that her descendants still permeate this school, the original like reptilian inhabitants of Alameda. One of them is a 6th grader at the school, actually. I think we all know him as Nathaniel. Nathaniel, I forget his last name. I think it starts with B. If anybody can help me locate
I think
him.
Blumenherz.
Something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, so it is entirely true that the lizard was entombed at the bottom of ACLC.
Yeah.
But the way that we got where we are today is that, well, first the first big event was the 1906 earthquake, and that was caused a catastrophic landslide, and that is the deepest stratum of ACLC besides the original bedrock down there that hasn't been touched for thousands of years.
Second most layer.
Yeah, so it's the second most layer, and that's where the first bone field is.
Of course.
And that's where a great portion of ACLC's population in the past would have died all at once. And
Where'd
then
they die from? Just the earthquake?
yeah, the earthquake killed them and buried them.
Oh, that's
and
unfortunate.
where the first seal of Lynn Boone actually is located.
So she's
or
under
was
all
located.
that.
She's under all of that. That's like, I don't even know how much. That's like 900 meters down. That's like really deep.
Yeah,
So
it's deep.
they do say that the underground tunnels below ACLC right now are almost 9 times bigger in volume than the surface. But I'd say that's a conservative estimate. I would say 100 times deeper. They just haven't
We
gone
don't
down
like
there.
conservative estimates.
No, I don't. I
No.
like to exaggerate and make hyperboles.
liberal
and lie,
estimates.
even. I might be a liberal. It slowly got filled up more and more, but after the 1906 earthquake, Arthur Anderson had his first brush with mortality.
Oh.
And that is when he realized he needed to become immortal.
Ah.
So he imported the Persian immortal emperor Xerxes, who escaped an assassination attempt in
That's-
500 BC and
That's our
resigned
Algebra
the
2
throne.
teacher at the school.
No.
I recognize
I'd
it
say-
from the ancient scriptures.
I'd say if you really want to know, make him do this with his hand, and you will see a seam right here, a sewn seam, and perhaps also hay sticking out, because his body is completely desiccated, and it is stuffed with salt and straw.
Of course.
So if you want to find out, I would say put a match up to him
Like a
and
lit
see what
match.
happens. Yes, if it's
He's
really
highly
true.
flammable, is he?
Yes, he's extremely flammable, maybe even reactive. He could be explosive. I haven't
Maybe
checked.
I don't want to put a match up to him.
I mean, I'm saying if you want to know, I mean, that's one way
I
to
want
do
to
it.
know, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but now-
Understandable.
After that, when he imported the immortal Xerxes, he decided that he was going to have him teach him the secret of immortality, how he was able to stay alive for like 2,000
Do you know the secret?
years. I don't. This is a very closely guarded secret. But then what happened was, at this point, there was the second generation of ACLC settlers, and this includes some of the most longest tenured teachers here, and that would be David Dilworth was there, Molly was there, Elaine Camney was there.
You're not going to believe this, but we actually got David Dilworth on the show.
No way.
We did it.
I thought really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he's still alive? It's been like 100 years.
It's
since
been a
then.
while.
I guess it really
He's
worked.
going strong.
So
Was
what
David
they did?
Hoops and with the original
Oh, but he was in the
settlers?
first generation,
Uh,
so he was already there.
Is it true that David Hoops killed a man with his car?
It is entirely true. When
Oh, we can't talk about this. Go on.
never mind. That was back in the 20s anyway. It doesn't matter. And that's so. After that, they decided that they were going to betray Arthur Anderson
They
so-
would never.
to steal the secret of immortality.
Ah.
That's what they were going to do. Now, could you believe that? So what they did
I find it hard.
was they killed
Oh,
him.
the guy,
And
Arthur Anderson.
they pulled the immortality out of him. Like they drew it out like a magician, like pulling a rope out of his sleeve from his throat, and they all
Because
split it
immortality's
amongst
a worm.
themselves. It's like a big worm, basically, that like kind of gets itself into your intestines. It's
Yeah.
pretty long, so they were pulling it out for like 20 minutes maybe, and it gets stuck somewhere. So they just yank it out like
Yeah,
that.
they
But
recorded
he was
the
dead,
amount
so
of
it
time.
doesn't matter. Yeah, they made sure there was a guy with like a stopwatch. He was recording the whole thing, just in case they needed to like do like an immortality surgery, and they needed to see how quickly they had to pull it out.
How do you feel good about the fact that you are the largest segment on this on this podcast?
I very much do, because this is very important to the
Yeah.
people. They must know this.
This is the real truth.
The thing is, though, that after that, they all divided up the worm amongst themselves, and then they had a big barbecue, and they ate it, and now they are immortal, supposedly.
But I feel they would be less than fully immortal.
Yes,
seeing
they
as
didn't have the
ate a
full
segment
worm.
of the worm.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, but Xerxes can vomit up those worms like every 1,000 years after he was infested by them back in the Anatolian mountains where he escaped after his assassination attempt in 500 BC.
Yeah.
So, I'd say maybe it's probably like extinct in the wild. I'd say the only way for these worms to reproduce is to hatch out of his entrails.
1 second.
So now that he's gone, anything you want to say that you can't normally?
David Hoops killed a man with a Ford Oldsmobile in the 1920s. Basically, after they stole that thing from him, I mean, that's when the third generation began. So they sold, first of all, they sold him out to the IRS before they killed him. And so then there was this thing called the Arthur Anderson Exxon tablet that he had.
What is that?
Well, that's the ancient tablet of magic that Arthur Anderson had that would keep him safe from IRS agents.
So that's all it did.
Yeah, it's like it would cast like a protective bubble of wealth and prosperity onto our school.
Well, we know that didn't work.
Well, after they shattered it, the thing is, after they shattered it, it broke into 7 pieces, and so they hid it all around. Well, it was still a pit then. We don't know where they are now.
Probably pretty deep.
And then the IRS agents came and they killed him, and then they pulled the worm out of him, and then they had the barbecue. The famous 1906 worm barbecue at ACLC. That happened. And then after that, it so happened that they locked him in 7 coffins for each of the 7 fragments of the Arthur Anderson Exxon scandal. So that way, if you ever want to release him, he's still immortal. He's fully immortal. So when they killed him, that wouldn't keep him dead for long. He's alive in there. He's like pounding on the first layer of the coffin. Yeah, he's screaming as loud as he can. Yeah. But he can't get out.
You can hear it if you're in a very quiet testing area.
Exactly.
That's the screaming outside.
Yes. He is like wailing and screaming and biting at the inside and tearing out his nails and everything. They can't even grow back fast enough for him to claw out of it. But it's all right. One day somebody... Listen. Then they locked him behind a huge door underground in the first bone pit. That's before the earthquake. Yeah. And so they locked him in there, and the door can only be opened if it is smeared with the blood of a federal agent.
Yes, of course.
And then
I know a lot of
you
doors
enter,
like
and you must put in the 7 fragments to open the 7 coffins.
Of
you will release Arthur Anderson, and he will bring back all the money to this school. This school is broke because we betrayed him and incurred his wrath.
Of course, yeah, of course.
We shouldn't have messed with an immortal man.
We're immortal. He's immortal.
Exactly. Generations have lived and died in poverty at this school because we have betrayed Arthur Anderson. We have to let him out. Yeah. It's been way too long. It's been 100 years. More, 120 years. We have to release him. Yeah. But that's very difficult now. 900 meters down is how far you have to go to get there.
How many feet is that?
How many feet? I don't know, like times 3 that. I don't fucking know, I'm not a scientist. Anyway.
Like 10?
So, the thing is, in the 4th generation, there was a man named Jeremy Goodrow.
I know him.
You should know him.
Yeah.
And basically, he used to be a man, but now he's a tree. And he lives underground.
An underground tree?
Yes. Jeremy
Is the whole tree underground?
Yes, it's now fully underground.
Ah.
Because, basically, he learned about the ancient history of this place after he rediscovered it. And... So he decided that he needed to find the shards of the Exxon scandal and save the school because he loved this school so much and everybody in it and would never do anything to prove otherwise. One time, he told a starving man, and a man fed him. A man fed a starving man on the streets. And Jeremy pulled him aside and he said, if my wife was pregnant and was going into labor and I had to drive her to the hospital or something like that.
Yeah.
And then he gave him a severe consequence. The man fed the starving beggar a single peanut. But if my wife was pregnant going into labor and I had to drive her to the hospital. What about that?
Yeah.
Anyway, he loved this school very much.
I've heard that tale, that tall tale.
Really?
Quite a
Yes.
few times,
It was it's a very old tradition here.
He also
at
hated his
ACLC.
wife.
Well, we don't know that. She was pregnant and going into labor.
Allegedly hated his wife.
Anyway, he
That's just what his wife
He sent two aspiring soldiers to go venture into the depths there. One Steve Boyd and one Jim.
Is that what happened to Steve Boyd?
Well, what happened was they found a broken layer, the third seal. And there was some kind of toxic spore or something, but they didn't know yet.
Like Alien.
Sort of.
It's like the movie.
Basically, the movie Alien. And so then there was a big group of them,
15.
and he went down, and he went down there, and then suddenly he felt something in his back, and it turns out Jim had stabbed him in the back and left him to die out there.
What?
And he left, and he stole all the priceless artifacts from the tomb, and he went and he buggered off. He never came back.
This is Jim Fagundes.
Yes, he fugged on these.
No.
And basically, he fugged him over. Let's say that much.
Fagundes.
The problem is, Steve never died either. He never even died because of the spores from Lynn Boone. So now he's an immortal corpse, just like kind of wrapped in like linens there, like a mummy in the tomb. Lynn Boone.
Yeah.
Sentenced to death by the leaders of ACLC for revealing the truth.
There is a theory that Steve's death was an inside job. Well, his undeath was an inside job.
That's why I'm investing in my feet so I can the camera steady.
It's possible that Jeremy Goodrow wanted to get rid of him, that he never wanted to retrieve the shards of the Arthur Anderson Exxon scandal. I don't believe it, though.
I wouldn't either.
Because he loved this school so much.
He did.
You know, if my wife was pregnant...
Wait, how did he become a trainee?
And she was going into labor and I had to drive her to the hospital.
Yep.
That's all I got to say about that.
What happened to him that made him turn into a tree?
He sat outside one day, and his skin started to turn into bark.
Don't go outside.
And then his toes started to turn into roots. And then his feet and roots and legs all started to go into the ground, and he started to get bigger, and his arms and his fingers started to spread out and turn into branches, and then he started to sprout like leaves on his fingers, and then he realized he was a tree before it was over. I mean, he didn't stand a chance.
Rookie mistake.
But the tree is a good tree.
Don't go
Jeremy
outside.
good tree.
Don't go outside.
Don't go outside and sit on grass. You might turn into a tree.
Yeah,
Do not touch grass.
You will.
Do not touch grass, whatever you do. Now, what happened then was this tree occasionally fruits. And this tree, when
It's
it
underground
fruits, it doesn't need light for whatever reason. I'll get to it later. So when it flowers, a sort of like eggplant shaped like thing, like fruit comes out of the flower, and it's sort of like a pomegranate in the way that the flower hardens and becomes the fruit. But then
Now what does this fruit do?
bursts open, and a David is born.
Like David Hoops?
Have you ever wondered
Or
why
just
there
a-
are so many Davids at this school?
Yeah.
Just your average David?
That's why. Anybody named David,
David Hoops,
I would
David
say-
Gunderson, David Davidson,
so many Davids
David,
at this school, and
David,
many of them,
David,
almost all of them,
David.
have come from that beautiful tree, still underground.
Still on the ground.
And the way it's fed is there are these pockets of the ACLC.
Did you say
underground. It gets fed, yes.
Like,
Not like a fed, but
okay.
like
Oh,
it eats
I got
them.
scared.
No, I know. The way that this tree sustains itself is that there are these pockets of the ACLC underground where there are like heaps of dead bodies that are decomposing and pressurizing a very small space. And the tree kind of grows these veins, these roots that work as veins, and then they kind of like form little capillaries around these pits and holes full of dead people and fuming gases, you know?
Yeah.
And then it exchanges gases through the veins,
So this is
and
the
that's how it gets its
biology of the
energy.
tree.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, but if you ever manage to like get down there and you're digging around, which you should never do, you should follow the tunnels because there are many dangerous things that are off the path of that.
Yeah.
And let's say that you are doing that, which I suggest you never do. If you find like a sort of cocoon of roots underground, which should be very unusual to you because that does not happen.
Not a lot of those underground.
Not a lot of those underground, you'd say, do not go any further. Because if you depressurize the corpse chamber, it'll fill with steaming, hot, like noxious gases and completely melt your face and organs and everything, turn you into a skeleton on the spot.
Yikes.
I would want that to happen to me.
That's right.
Don't go into tunnels.
Do go in the tunnels.
Do go
Don't
in
go
the
off trail.
Don't go
the
off.
tunnels.
Don't
That is all I'm
explore
saying.
the tunnels.
Well, I mean, where there's lights.
Is there any bioluminescent bugs down there?
No, they're big rats, though.
Are they bioluminescent?
Nope. They have big eyes, though.
Big eye, did the eyes
Very
shine?
big eyes. That we call them tunnel pigs
Oh,
because
tunnel.
they're like yay
Do
big.
they taste like pigs?
I don't know. I've never had one.
Why
I'd
not?
say they taste more like possums.
Chicken.
Oh, chicken! Everything tastes like chicken.
Christopher.
Would you believe that?
Yeah.
Now,
Here it comes. Do the dance. Do your dance.
The dance?
Do your dance.
have the dance.
Do your dance.
No dance.
Do your dance,
Gritty.
boy. Do your dance.
Gritty.
Do your dance, boy. Do your dance. Do your dance.
All right.
Okay, he's passing through.
Our next guest is here. We're
Yeah.
gonna do a segment about ACLC's history.
Man, I'm sitting kind of close now.
He better
How
not.
many podcasts do you think I have to make before I can graduate?
I don't know.
Well, that's a good question. Just make this the podcast. There you go. You're done. You already got like 30 minutes of material. Split that up into 4 episodes, and you're good. You're graduated. Turn that in. They're like, oh, you know what, Ellis, have your diploma right now. You can go. You're free to go. Just don't go into the tunnels. Do
Don't.
not go in. If you want to go into the tunnels,
Wait, do
make
go
su-
into tunnels, don't go off the path.
Exactly. Make sure you always go with a guide.
Yep.
Make sure that you bring a rope with you, like in kindergarten when you go on field trips.
When
Like,
you always
bring-
thought,
yeah, hold on to the rope. Your
rope,
guide
yeah.
is going to go in front. And don't go past the lights because we set up a nice area. It's all lit up. You can go sightseeing. There are no tunnel
bocce
pigs.
ball.
Or if you can still hear birds, that means you're good. Because sometimes birds get lost in the tunnels, but they never get lost that deep.
No.
Or else they
So
die.
you don't want to go too deep in the tunnels.
not go too
underneath
deep.
ACLC.
Because there are bug people down there. And more.
Are they related to the lizard people?
No.
Oh.
This is a symptom of the disease that has been spreading as a result of Lynn Boone's death.
What, don't you mean
You know, there's a
lizard
bug
too?
person who's a teacher here.
Oh, who was
They
it?
wouldn't let you know this. It's a certain person who inhabits this area of the school.
Ooh.
This is actually the nest of a bug person.
Uh,
If you all didn't know. I mean, I'm not going to say names, but you notice the kind of long coats that he wears? It's to hide his wings. He has he has 6 legs because he's an insect. So 1, 2, 3, and then fold it up on his chest. 4 and 5 and 6, whatever. I don't care. I counted wrong. You get? All right. And then you notice the hair. It goes like this.
What?
Antennae. He has to comb them back. Obviously.
Of course.
Of course, yeah.
You notice how you've never seen him without a shirt on? It's because
All right.
he would have a
Thankfully I
soft
haven't.
underbelly, a soft chitinous
Okay,
underbelly.
what do you have 30 seconds or 5 minutes left of stuff to say?
5 hours? Don't worry about it, son. I'll tell you, that's all you need to know for now.
Oh.
Because you can go down to the top.
Federal government, open up. Federal government. Oh, hey, get in here.
Oh, God. Oh.
All right.
So,
They're coming in soon. Give your final remarks.
Put in there. They need to check themselves. Hey, I need less banging on my walls, Scrubs.
Sorry.
Please.
here's a special guest, David Dilworth, the visual arts teacher at our school here. He's been around for how many years?
I'm saying 21.
21 years. That's a long time. He's been here pretty much since the beginning, like a little while after. So what was it like being at AACLC just a little after founding?
Oh man, I love to reminisce about this. It was so exciting, but so chaotic. It was, I'd been scoring a film for Josiah Hooper, the original video teacher. And he told me when he came to my studio to check out stuff for his film that he worked as a teacher and that they had fired their music teacher. It was like midway through the school year, and I never found out why. But he just begged me because I was using similar software and basically I'd known him for a while, and he was thinking, man, that I might be able to do him a favor. So I really came here to do a favor for one of my homies who was also employing me to score his film, and he was saying that it was basically 2 hours a week, I think, and so it wasn't for money. I mean, I was getting paid, but that wasn't the reason. It was just to do a favor.
Sub thing?
Kind of. I didn't really even know. He was just like, oh, yeah, you'd be teaching these beat making classes using Reason, the software that I used to use a whole lot. And I figured, man, just kind of doing my homie a favor was really the main thing. So I come into to school to teach, but I hadn't gotten even met with anybody officially yet. Like I think maybe talked through email, that kind of thing. But basically went in there, and they gave me, I think at the front desk. Oh, at that point too, there are no classrooms. So it's just like going into this big gym space and just going, whoa, because I've been to, Berkeley High, all the traditional Berkeley schools, which were pretty straightforward in terms of the layout. So this was really a far cry from that, and it tripped me out, in a positive way. I was like, it's
pretty wild.
Wait, what? Is super chaotic, really creative. I would just see like all these kids milling around, and I'd realize, oh yeah, this is a class, but there's kids like in that mix who aren't part of that class who are doing other stuff too, and just kind of hanging out and just kind of wanted to see what was going on, and it would just be this like, it felt like creative chaos, and those are two things I love. And so I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. But I remember going to Paul Bentz, who was the first lead facilitator, and going, Paul, like, where's my classroom? And him going, what? We don't have classrooms. And me just going, where do I teach? Like, it was really confusing because there's no onboarding at all. So then I finally found the little tiny, there's like a closet-sized computer lab, which was where I taught. Yeah. And it was just hectic, but really fun. And so I really fell in love with teaching because of that. It was just like so different from any school environment that I could ever imagine. And it felt really right to me because I thrive in chaos and creativity. And it was like, all right, cool. I mean, I could do this. It was really exciting. But at the same time, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'd never taught a class before. It was like, I taught a bunch of other like beat maker people how to make beats on the software. And I'd also done this thing with my daughter's classroom where I'd make music with these elementary school kids using, these different computer tools. And just as a favor, like as a parent who wanted to help out the classroom and hook these kids up. And that was really meaningful. So I think that was probably something that seeded me with like this idea that teaching would be kind of an acceptable or downright fun thing to do.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't until I got thrown in, just kind of like, all right, I guess I'll do a favor, to my homie, and then I'm being kind of thrown in the deep end of the pool, and then kind of thriving in it. And also, I got hella lucky because I had these tiny classes, but two of the guys in my first class, like, were already making professional careers by the end of the semester. Like one of them was this kid Aldrin, who actually, oh man, I love telling this story too. It turned out that one of my star students, the first year teaching, didn't even go to ACLC and was just lying to me because they didn't have a beat making class at Encinal. And his homie Jakuti, who was the daughter of Mafi, who founded Nia, she has just this powerhouse family. It seems like everyone in that family is some like mover and shaker in the creative field. And so her son Jakuti is a professional drummer and really skilled musician. And his friend, let's see. So I'm thinking 2001, he must have been 16, 17. And now this is 22 years later than that. So dude, he must be like late 30s type of thing then. But he was starting to, I guess, I can't remember if he was getting placements as well. He was just doing a lot of cool stuff. But it's his friend Aldrin who came into the class again as an Encinal student, but never. He's just like, no, I go to ACLC. My name's Aldrin, and it wasn't until I was turning in grades at the end, and the lead facilitator Paul was saying, no, this kid Aldrin Pale-Pay, he doesn't go here. And I'm like, no, I've talked to his dad, and I thought I was just spelling the name wrong because it's kind of an interesting spelling for the last name, but I was just like, no. Eventually, I realized nope. And after talking to Jakuti, he was like, yeah, I didn't think he would be let in the class if he wasn't a student at ACLC. So he just fudged it a little bit. And I was totally cool with it. But he was ended up going on tour with this a famous trap rapper back then in 2001. Aldrin did. Mike Jones was the guy, and he's a legendary dude in the whole game. And so it was really inspiring to me to go, oh man. All right, when I'm making my beats and that kind of thing, I love it, and I feel like I'm doing something that's fun, but it doesn't feel like I'm like doing anything very meaningful. It's like making beats, send off some rapper, put out something, and then I'm doing the same thing the next day. But then when I was actually having these kids, just kind of take it to another level and going on tour already, I was just like, oh man, this feels really it felt super rewarding in this way that I didn't get from sitting around in my house in my underwear making beats. And so it was like also being part of something bigger, and feeling like I was just doing something that actually was like that the world needed, or maybe not needed, but that I was helping out other people was something that,
thing.
And I didn't think I needed that to feel good about my life, but I realized that I don't know, either I do or it just taught me that that's just another way to roll that I really felt sparked by, it was cool.
Fulfilling.
It really was. And I also felt like the students at ACLC were just weird, eccentric, interesting people. I'd just be like, whoa, what are you doing right now? And or the kids that would come in, like my first students, they're just really interesting kids. And I just really felt that this was a special place that attracted really special people. And I was like, hell yeah, I can do this. Yeah, it was really exciting. And it was the vibe that I could not describe. I was like, when I try to describe what my school is like, I was like, well, whatever school you go to, it's not like that. It was kind of how I'd start off,
fallen off that a little bit, but it's somewhat still there. We're still different. We're still different
and have this very eccentric vibe to a lot of the kids here that I think is really what keeps me coming back. And I feel like this place. Yeah, you're right. We were a far cry from that very oddball school that doesn't look like any other school. We look and feel a lot like a traditional school now, but there is still some special stuff.
I think accepting here, definitely.
Yeah. That I think is really key. Really kind of an opening, embracing community in general.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people can be themselves and be that weird person that they truly are meant to be, and not be like, no, I'm actually just that football player who's really good at throwing 1,000-yard passes, and it's like, no, I'm not. I'm just that nerdy person who loves to watch anime and loves to do weird stuff and just wants to do like you can just be that eccentric, unique person here and not feel like
I've ever seen anyone get bullied here.
Yeah, and you're a perfect example. Like you'll wear some of the coolest outfits that might like people might mess with you if you're at another school for but here it's like no, that's how it should be. It's like you should be getting dapped for wearing. You come into school in a top hat and like a double-breasted long I don't know even what to call that kind of coat, and people will just be like, hell yeah, here. Whereas think
twice about it. This community here.
Yeah, it's like you're not. I think you're not only encouraged to be yourself, but also like, man, you will get props for being a more unique individual here, and that is such a beautiful thing. It's like I always felt pressure to conform when I was going to schools, and it was also the '80s, which was a much more. Conformity was a big part of going to school in the 80s. It's like, unless you were a punk rocker, because that was why punk rock came into being, is feel like, really? Everyone, if you're a dude, you have to have a pastel Izod or polo and some skinny jeans that are stonewashed, acid washed. It's a very narrow kind of sense of what an acceptable way of dressing as a dude was. At least that was what I felt like it going to these. And this is in Berkeley, which should be a weird, more accepting place. But I felt like it was pretty rigid and pretty catered towards a very privileged yuppie mode of dressing. And so it makes sense that punk rockers were like, hell no, that ain't me. I'm going to just do some crazy other stuff.
Gotta go do your own thing. Yeah, that's kind of some ACLC vibes. What was it like having so much money to work with?
Oh my God, that was miraculous. The main thing is I didn't realize this until the money wasn't there, and all of a sudden it was class sizes. It allowed us to have tiny classes without having to play the same game as every other public school, which is basically head in the seat equals money from the state and the Fed equals now we can pay teachers and staff and exist. But we didn't have to worry about that.
It's like a whole business, but you guys just had it.
We had tiny classes, and that was so good. Like that's the main thing that I miss is like my first music class, I think I had 10 people in it, and that was considered a legit full class. And so I was like, yeah, you can teach way more effectively with 10 people and really connect with people and get to learn, know people really well. Whereas like a 30-person class versus 10, 15, then there's no comparison, Yeah. And also I think I had a lot smaller classes, so I didn't need to have as many computers. But when I needed gear, it was just a guaranteed thing where I just had the money for that. But in addition to that, the small class sizes, the real glorious aspects of that I reminisce way too nostalgically on is these fat lumps of money that they would throw at me at the end of the year, going, "Don't you know you have like $20,000 to spend by the end of the year?" And I'm like, well, this is second to last day of the of the school year or semester, so I have 24 hours to spend hell of money. So it'd be really dope. I mean, in some cases, it wouldn't. It was just me being a scrub and going like, oh, I should have known that if that happened last year, that I had the same budget to work with the next year, but I wouldn't always like plan accordingly. So I'd always have this huge windfall at the end where they'd just let me know that I have tens of thousands of dollars to spend.
So awesome.
So sometimes I'd do stuff like, all right, well, we don't need any new headphones, but now I'm spending like $150 on each pair of headphones. And so we'd have like really professional grade headphones to mix in. Here? We have one pair of the really expensive one, and they look the worst. So I always the people who know, oh, those Sennheisers, those are way better than I'm going to grab those. So the people who know will grab those immediately, but most people avoid them because they're the oldest, jankiest looking.
I want to see those.
I'll show you in a sec, because if you're ever using headphones in here, you want to grab those ones because they're easily 3 times, 4 times as good as any other headphone in the lab. But yeah, that was another cool stuff, was just those windfalls, and I'd just be like, I don't know if anyone's going to use this, but we'll just get it anyway just to see. So I had a lot of gear that would be kind of like experimental. I'd have a lot of stuff for live recording that we'd never use. These really expensive mics, compressors to like make the sound better as you're going in, and then realize, oh man, I should have planned out accordingly. So it was a good thing, but I wasted a lot of it in terms of like not being very wise with some of the purchases.
You didn't have a lot of time.
Yes.
Got to buy everything.
It would just be like, dude, I got to spend this. Otherwise, it's just the way that budgets work. If you don't spend the money, next year they give you the lesser amount. Like, oh no, we get you 20 grand was your budget, but if you're only spending 15, then that becomes your budget. So I knew that. So I was just like, all right, I'm just going to spend. And it would be totally ridiculous stuff sometimes, but it felt good, it felt like, because I think one of the things that keeps people away from the profession, that has a lot of first year teachers burning out, is support, like feeling like they're not supported and that they have needs that aren't being met. And so it was the opposite for me. I was like, hell yeah, like if I need something, man, I'm getting it. And so that felt really good. And it also they gave me a lot of leeway to create classes that didn't exist, and so that also felt like I just felt really supported. They're like, oh, you want to teach some weird stuff that we don't have a class for, but that I feel is really meaningful. They would have my back, and basically I'd have to do paperwork with UC to get my classes okayed, make sure that they're meeting these things called the A through G requirements. Yeah. But once I did that, the school was just like, yeah, do your thing. And so I felt super supported, and it was something that is another reason why I epically love this place, because I felt like they trusted me enough to let me create classes that I thought would be good, and not having someone kind of like go down the list and and make me change things or force me into a corner that I didn't want to be in. Whereas before I started teaching here, I was thinking, oh no, I actually would want to be a college art professor. And until I started to interview for some of those jobs, I'm like, dude, I want to teach life drawing all day, like figure drawing. No, I want to do something more interesting. And I realized that I'd have to be kind of pigeonholed into these really boring ass classes that I wasn't really feeling. And same with the average public school. I'd just be just kind of another cog in their system that they had set up. Whereas here they're like, no, tell us what you think might be something meaningful for a class, and then in every case they had my back and supported me and made that become a reality. So it was really cool.
That sounds awesome. Did you come up with your your digital arts classes? Yeah. Every single thing that I teach was something that I came up with just trial and error. And the hardest ones were my music classes because I'm like, man, I can't spend all the time doing like, all right, we're going to use traditional kind of Western music theory stuff because that'd be like, man, it'd be a 4 or 5 year sequence. It wouldn't be a 1 year class. And basically, and I felt like because I had learned some stuff, sometimes the traditional way and sometimes not, that there are a lot of ways to learn this stuff that hadn't really been invented yet. So I was like, so I still feel like it's my biggest challenge. Actually, this year, even though I've been teaching that class for 20 years, I've totally changed the curriculum this year to really fit a much more intuitive way to tap into making music. And I think it's I think it's a real game changer, to be honest. But we shall see by the end of the year if it's really gotten the learners where I think they need to be. But so far, it's really it is working, and I'm feeling excited. And the fact is, like, I never had to get permission for that or have somebody kind of go through and edit all of my things. Maybe that could be useful in some cases, but I haven't really felt the need. I've just felt really like you ask for it. You don't want them just coming in and changing everything because that's not your class.
Yeah, exactly. So I felt like they've given me the freedom and then supported me endlessly, and that makes me kind of feel like they'll have to drag me out of here kicking and screaming, or like what's the evil NRA, the Charles, what's his face? I have to pry that gun from my cold dead hand. They're gonna have to pry me out of AC, cold dead corpse out of ACLC because of those things. I felt like it's been just like, I don't know, like in a lot of ways, especially comparing my experience with other teachers and other schools' experience, I feel like it's been really, really ideal in a lot of ways, and not a lot of teachers can say that. I do feel like I've gotten lucky in a big way.
What was it like in the later years, like when the money was leaving? Kind of to manage it all. Yeah, I mean that it all seemed to happen in like a lot of things going on at the same time. Creation of Nia by Mama Mafi, and she was thinking, we need to expand this to have younger grades, whole K through 12 vision. But she also had different vision for how this model could be kind of tweaked to be more. I think she really had race and class in mind when Mafi started Nia, saying, "Hey, look, I want to have a model that fits a lot more kind of poor black and brown kids that aren't getting a fair shake in the average public school, and feeling like that our demographic was also kind of slanted, like a lot more." A lot less representative of Alameda or maybe not Alameda back then, but kind of like the East Bay in general, not quite as diverse. And I think Mafi was thinking that, and I'm kind of putting words in her mouth. Like I didn't ever talk to her about this stuff, but I was kind of imagining that was one big reason why Neo was started, and so that was one big thing that caused us a lot of bureaucratic changes. Like we had the CLCS board created because now we weren't just one school, we were two schools, and now we basically needed some kind of governing body that did involve the community, that did kind of provide some oversight. But it did change things a lot. Like all of a sudden we had like now we have Annalisa, thank goodness, in that role, who really came up from the trenches. But before her, we had like this one. God, I guess I shouldn't put in names, but we had some people who
who didn't know the school, who were essentially corporate-minded CEO type mentality, and really trying to make
that
a lot
does
of.
not mesh well at all.
It didn't mesh well. They didn't respect our democratic model at all, and so there's a lot of top-down bureaucratic wonkiness that really had a lot of old timers bailing on the ship
like
too.
Just post Arthur Anderson.
Yeah, and it was also coinciding with when Dave Hoops came in as lead facilitator. So some of the things that Dave would get demonized for weren't his fault. Some of them, were, but at the same time, there was just so much change going on. Namely, Arthur Anderson got in belly up. We used to have this huge endowment where what I would hear was that, like, dude, we have $1 million in reserves, and so we wouldn't have to worry about playing the traditional game of enrollment. We would have, there's just this big cash surplus, just kind of having our backs, and so basically having to. All of a sudden not live with that meant we had to expand enrollment in a big way. We had this governing board. We had a new lead facilitator who wasn't from the crew. Like before that, Lynn Kameny had been the last lead facilitator before Dave Hoops came in.
Lead facilitator.
Yeah, and she was.
Oh, wow.
and she was a career English facilitator, as you guys well know.
Back in Snell.
It was when we shared, we were in where the junior jets are now, and so Lynn, she was still teaching some English classes, but would be the lead facilitator, and so she always felt like part of the gang. She was like, no, she knows this. She knows she's not going to do anything that doesn't really fit the vibe and the things. She's been there and she helped create the school,
Yeah.
And so when Dave came in as lead, he was the first external member to take that position of power. And to be honest, like no one really onboarded him properly to like let him know how this school is so different from other schools. And so he was just coming from the perspective of a normal principal, like, how can I, increase test score performance, close the achievement gap? Those are some of the normal things that a principal has to worry about. Hey, want good test scores, want to make sure that there's more equity, those type of things.
He came from like being a principal at a different school to this.
Yeah, I think it was a charter school in Hayward that he'd worked for a while, and then basically came here. And it was really contentious, mainly because I think there's so much change. There's a lot of top-down stuff going on, which a lot of the old-timers were really upset about, going, no, you're not respecting the way we roll. And basically we were all of a sudden not having as much money, having to increase enrollment, having this sister school, this governing body. It was just a lot of change happening, which made us become a lot less experimental, a lot more traditional. A lot of things were happening. Oh, and the fourth piece of the puzzle was all of a sudden Alameda Unified had shifted from a very pro-charter vibe to a very anti-charter vibe, and they were starting to a lot of real powerhouses. Yeah, it felt like the rug was getting pulled out from under us, because I think before they had recognized that we were providing a vital service that the traditional big public schools in Alameda were not. So we had our own lane that was respected. But then it was partly because of what was going on in Oakland and their charter schools, with like just 1,000,001 charter schools being put forth with not very much oversight, and in some cases just really not just some very underperforming schools that were also in some cases being used as ways to fight this political battle around public education. Really the charter the private voucher model. We're like, hey, there's a lot of especially rich people who are like, well, we shouldn't be having to pay all these taxes into public schools. My kids don't even go there. They go to the private Catholic school or whatever. They want to have things like where taxpayers get vouchers where they can use that money to where all schools will be privatized, and you use your voucher from the government to pay to subsidize to help pay for that. So essentially,
we'll say like get that to come into existence.
And it's still a big movement.
Charter schools as an example to argue their point.
Yeah, to say, hey, look, see, these more private, independent entities are the future of education, and we need to have all of public education kind of scuttled, and so that we have everything private, basically just a privatization agenda with the tax money going to vouchers that families could choose where they want. So it could be like, hey, we can't have our kids going to this libtard, democratic indoctrination camp. We need to send our kids to the Jesuit religious academy where they'll be learning good Christian values and because separation of church and state. Man, a religious school is not getting state or fed money. Thank goodness. But a lot of people don't want that to happen. So like Trump's education secretary DeVos was the pinnacle of that evil privatization agenda, and as well as being dumb as a post part of this very rich, privileged powerhouse family that is very religious and wants religious schools funded by the state and Fed, wants education to include the public education to include those things. It's so I think when Dave came to be lead, when NEO was founded, when we had the formation of the CLCS board, all of that stuff kind of was happening in a very similar time frame to cause, man, this environment to feel pretty upended. It was hectic and things were changing a lot of chaos. A lot of the old timers were just bailing on the school. It was really the beginning of this problem that we're still experiencing with, especially middle school facilitator turnover being really big, and it's and just retaining people has been a problem ever since.
What sort of time period did this all start with the lack of money, the chaos, CLCS board being created?
I'm thinking this was roughly a decade ago. This is in my head, but I'm sure it's like somewhere loosely around there. This is all just off of the top of my head. So little nerding out online that could give you more specifics. But roughly, I'm thinking roughly about a decade ago is when most of the stuff was going down. And I bet even just the ACLC website, the founding date of NEO would be roughly around that time. But man, I'm also probably pushing things together in a very distorted timeline. So I'm thinking there could easily be a couple years between these things that in my mind are all happening simultaneously, but all roughly in that same few year period. Of roughly 10 years ago.
That's a little before me and this guy, the cameraman, came to the school.
Yeah.
Avery the cameraman.
It has gotten to the point where sometimes when I see learners that or former alumni, I'm like, oh, some of them to me really represent a whole nother era, and I get really especially moved when I get to reconnect with those people. And when I see you guys after you guys have graduated, I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happens. Because I'm like, wait, because things have changed a lot, and
I went to a different school.
Yeah. And obviously this year things feel especially different, right? And things
especially like post-COVID.
Yeah, COVID. Oh man, COVID.
That was rough.
Whew, I don't think education will be the same after COVID, and definitely, it seemed like everyone who was a school age kid during COVID, oh man, suffered badly. But the older you were, if you're a junior and senior when COVID hit, you were definitely affected less. But at the same time, it was hitting everybody really badly, and I'm still
just
shocked.
Lost their last years of high school though. That's gotta be rough.
Yeah, and I've been running into some families too. Like, man, my kid just stopped going to school and just exited out, and a lot of teachers too just went, you know what? Hell no, I'm out.
I mean, you gotta learn how to teach in this whole new environment. That's not.
Yeah, it was, and it was like all of a sudden, man. I think we had maybe a month or so to get distance learning to all of a sudden shift. I just remember it going from, I think it was in March, so it felt still pretty early in the semester. Like all of a sudden, there's this new sickness that's kind of sweeping across, and we're going to take it. But it seemed like, we're probably just going to take a week or two off, and then really fast turned into the whole school year is just gone, and now we're going to basically go into distance learning, and it was rough, and I felt like we as a school, just comparing it to Berkeley schools, we were way more on it compared to other school districts, but that shocks and horrifies me because just so much fell through the cracks, and just any kid who needed more help before that was exponentially jacked, once COVID hit. But I think we did gear up pretty fast, and I just remember dropping off gear at people's houses who couldn't make it here. Dave Hicks, who's no longer here, man, dropping off hotspots, laptops, Chromebooks to people's houses, and it was we were really rallying to try to make sure that learners had and families had the ability to access learning in some degree, but it was hard, you know,
It was rough,
and no one.
You guys made it happen.
I think we did a good job relatively, but no one really had it figured out.
It was
there was
definitely
no
hard to like cope with the circumstances. It was kind of rough.
It was really hard. I just remember most of my classes when it hit were all video classes, and so all of a sudden I go from like, having to check out cameras and everyone using my software to like, okay, at home we have your cell phone and that has a camera on it, hopefully. But other than that, how do I even get you guys the bare tools? I was so many sleepless nights and just freak out periods, and just something like just having to throw up my hands, and go, oh well, what can I can only worry about the problems that I've swayed, that I can actually deal with and make some change in. But other than that, I got to throw some stuff out in terms of just I can't worry about that because there's no freaking way I can change it, It was hard. It was really hard.
It was kind of funny though, like the beginning period when everyone was learning how to use Zoom and everything. No one had their mic muted. It was just like,
dude, crazy feedback issues.
Yeah.
Zoom. Remember the Zoom bombing days too? Some naked people person comes into your Zoom like, oh my god! Like
it was a
it'd be
little
like
hard to take it seriously.
It really was. And the thing that I think would have been Adam, are we starting 6th period yet? Dang. Okay. The thing that I think threw us all for a loop in terms of the facilitators was like everyone realized fast there's no legal or morally sound way that you could force kids to actually be accountable by turning on their video. It was like, man, sometimes bandwidth was just not enough. You're barely hanging in there with 30 megs a second.
You'd have to. You couldn't hear them after that.
Yeah. And so you couldn't hey, I'm gonna downgrade you for not having a fast enough internet connection. It's like, of course not, right? So there was really no way to force people to have their camera on, which meant no accountability at all. Like, or maybe not none, but it was really hard to some learners who just be essentially playing video games all day in class. You'd be like, hey, all right. Just check in with me for 5 seconds. Just say something or put something in the chat. Nothing, and you realize that in some cases maybe a third of the class is just gone, but they're just haven't logged out because they want to get credit. But it was definitely really hard, and to learn new people and get some kind of connection with new students over a Zoom was like, hell no, you're a non-entity. You're just a talking head, and it was super hard.
I gotta come clean. One of your digital music classes, I was really tired from gaming the night before. I was in my bed, and I heard you out through my speaker, talking to me. And I was like, oh shit.
That was those weird Wednesday things where just like not a real class, but just kind of like a meeting. That threw me for sure. You weren't the only one, but I think it was like 2/3 of that group was like in that same boat. And I was like, I'm just going to treat this as like anyone who wants to can do this. If not, just hang in there and hope for the best. But it was that was definitely something that to me illustrated how bad off we were. It was just like, oh my god, it was crazy.